The ninth richest person in the U.S., a man worth close to $60 billion, wants to become president of the United States. Michael Bloomberg announced his entrance into the Democratic presidential primary field. Joining me now to discuss this is one of our regular contributors, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, I don't think Bloomberg needs the cash, but he's not a big President Trump fan, and he says he wants to focus on healthcare, ending gun violence, combating climate change, and creating jobs. But the last time I checked, Trump was pretty good at creating jobs for the American people.
Oh yeah, if it's going to be based on the economy, they'll go neck and neck. But who knows if he would get the bid from the Democratic Party? It's very interesting. Now, the Democrats, what's their biggest issue with Donald Trump? Well, besides the fact that they call him orange and nobody wants to go to lunch with him, they think he's not such a great person. No one's looking at his policies. Everyone's looking at the fact that he's out of touch and he's a billionaire. Well, guess what? Michael Bloomberg has exponentially many more billions than Donald Trump has. Now, how will he be received? Will he get the nomination? And then if he gets the nomination, how would he do against Donald Trump? That's all the questions that we're asking. Look, Michael Bloomberg is very similar to Donald Trump in many ways, both from New York, both did very well in New York, and both did very well accumulating a lot of money. Now, his focus is on the areas that you just mentioned, very important issues, hot topic issues that, perhaps can take Americans' minds off of, the current muddy waters of Washington and say, well, we tried one billionaire, maybe because he did so well for us in certain areas, such as the economy, maybe we could have another billionaire who is maybe a kinder person or a nicer person. I mean, we're dealing with so many emotions that people aren't really looking at the policies. And if they were, well, Donald Trump's not doing too badly, particularly where the economy is concerned, where jobs are concerned. So it should be very, very interesting. And I'm more interested to see how the Democrats will react. And he doesn't need any money, so he's not going to have any problem with the fundraising or, qualifying himself in that capacity. But let's just see how they look at him. If they look at candidates like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren as these socialists who are far left and want to turn this country into they're like the 180 from Donald Trump. Well, they're not going to be able to accept Michael Bloomberg because he has very many similar traits. And let's remember that he used to run as a Republican. He very recently changed parties. So again, I think it'll be very interesting to see how the reaction goes, especially from the Democrats, and if he gets the bid, how will it be when he goes up against Donald Trump?
You mentioned the socialist aspect there with Warren and with Bernie Sanders. Perhaps maybe the Democrats are looking for more a centrist approach. Fight fire with fire when it comes to Donald Trump.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting to see, maybe a lot of centrists from both sides would look at someone like Michael Bloomberg and say, well, he's the happy medium, meaning we're not going to elect a socialist or someone who's so far left. We can't keep giving things away for free. That's just not it's not logical. And on the other side, you have Donald Trump, who's much more of a kind of a rogue figure these days. He's considered somebody who says it like it is, someone who, doesn't really have to listen to anybody, just does what he wants to do. So perhaps, but again, you're dealing with two New Yorkers. What will the reaction be from Middle America when they look at a Michael Bloomberg? Or how will the swing states, most importantly, react to a Michael Bloomberg candidate? I think it'll be very interesting to see what the reaction is. But if they go up against each other, maybe the centrists would opt to get Donald Trump out of office and have someone who is much more calming for the nation, at least put us back on the right track, regardless of his political party.
Lisa, more than 100 Democrats sent a letter to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo rebuking the State Department's decision to stop considering Israeli settlements a violation of international law. That's a bit of a policy shift, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's only a policy shift since the Obama days, where President Obama called out Israel, had a very personal vendetta against Bibi Netanyahu, and perhaps a very non-American approach to our relationship with Israel. Israel has been in existence over 70 years. The U.S. has been a staunch ally, and both countries have had a symbiotic relationship where the Israelis help the U.S. with security, and the U.S. helps them with foreign aid, of course. And there's many more, obviously, overlaps and parts of their relationship that I'm leaving out, but it's been a very natural relationship and allied relationship between the two. Now, President Obama, in the last hours of his presidency, sought to call out the Israelis, as he did, meddling in the election to oust Bibi Netanyahu, which didn't work, but also to call out the settlements. And now Donald Trump obviously overturned many of those policies of the Obama era, particularly that of being very close to Bibi Netanyahu, moving the Israel embassy from Tel Aviv to the actual capital of Israel, in Jerusalem. And now, more recently, Secretary Pompeo coming out and saying, we really don't have an issue with the settlements. And why did he do that? Because the Trump administration is working very hard to strike a peace deal between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and the Palestinians are not cooperating. They're not even interested in hearing the terms of the deal, which include an economic portion that would change the lives of every Palestinian. And because of that, I think the U.S. says, well, if you're not going to play along, well, then we're not going to call out the Israelis on the settlements, because that's probably not your issue. If you're not looking for a solution, you're looking to prolong the problem. And that's how they see, the Palestinians' involvement in all of this. Now, ironically, the bill is being driven by Levin, who is a Jewish member, a lawmaker. And, it's very ironic when you have Democrats who, their party, their partisanship drives every part of their being, whether it's emotional, political, and again, our relationship with Israel has been, for decades, it's been ironclad. And to say that, just because this is the Trump presidency and because they have made a statement to go back on it and to write this letter, it really is un-American.
The Hong Kong protests drove a record 70% turnout at the recent Hong Kong elections, Lisa. Many pro-democracy candidates views this as a big win.
It's a huge win. We've never seen this type of outcome in an anti-China and pro-democracy outcome in the election. It just goes to show that these protests were not in vain. The people of Hong Kong have spoken out. This is what they want. This is what they want for their future. Now, a lot of experts are looking at this outcome and saying maybe this is a forecasting of what's to come in China, meaning the people of the region are changing their ways. They want something totally different. Hal, you and I talk about a whole long list of foreign policy stories about elections on the Foreign Desk website. You can look at the reaction to so many protests around the globe, the reaction to so many elections around the globe right now, and we're looking at a lot of this rip and repair type of global reactions. It's like a domino effect. Just protests on almost every continent, elections that are being overturned after decades of people of one nation voting one way, now turning. Those nations that have been highly conservative are going towards democracy. Those who have been highly liberal going towards the conservative. I think people are just more aware and they want something different. They want to get rid of the status quo and do something different. And we've watched the protests in Hong Kong week after week. Hallie and I have spoken about this, and we have said it's only going to get worse before it gets better, because the people of Hong Kong know what they want. And this election is truly an indication of that.
Lisa, a Phase 2 U.S.-China deal looks less likely as Washington and Beijing are struggling through Phase 1 right now.
Yes, so Phase 1 really is just coming to the acknowledgement that they want a deal, and we know that they do. Phase 2 is talking more about the very specifics of the deal, and when it comes to the U.S., what's their gripe with China? It's intellectual property. And we've talked about this before, that we can't get the Chinese to get on board by saying we're not going to cheat, we're not going to copy, and we're not going to rip you off. And now you have China actually coming out and saying, well, to the U.S., well, you want this deal, we can take it or leave it, and we won't concede this part. It's going to be very hard, very, very hard to get the Chinese to say we won't cheat, we won't steal, we won't rip you off. And again, Donald Trump looking to do this before the 2020 election. He's looking to ease the tariffs. He's looking to improve our economy. Think about all the imports that come into the West, to the U.S., I'm sure Canada, Mexico, and into our trade circle here, and how it affects all of us in every way, in every sector. So again, this is something that I think China knows Donald Trump wants, and they're going to drive a very hard deal to give it to him.
Lisa, in Romania, the country's centrist party got in again. President Klaus Iohannis easily won a presidential runoff vote, crushing his socialist challenger, and the pledge was to restart judicial reform.
Yes, how interesting. Hours ago, Secretary Pompeo issued a congratulations to the president of Romania. It's a win, and it's a win not only for this individual, not only for Romania, but a win against socialism and for a centrist candidate who has solid ideas and wants to carry them out. Again, we say look around the world, look at this, the turning away from these socialist ideals. Why? Because it hasn't worked. Name one country or one instance where socialism has actually worked. Is there one Venezuelan who stands up and says, yes, I highly recommend this? Obviously, people are looking around the world and they want something better, and they want to be pragmatic, and they want to be logical, and they want to have a better future. And I think when they have that opportunity to go to the polls, we're seeing the reality of what people want. And I think this election in Romania paints a clear picture of that.
Iran is restoring internet access as the protests in that country subside, but the government, Lisa, is threatening people with more arrests.
Yes, this has been a very, very tough crackdown. I've been covering Iran protests, for as long as I could remember. And if you look at the 40-year history of this current government, this theocracy, the mullahs that took over after the Shah's toppling in 1979, there have been protests that have been on the smaller side and ones that have been on the larger, with more momentum, like we had in 2009 after the fraudulent election. This time, we saw elections all across the country, in rural areas, in urban areas, setting fires, closing down highways, and really getting the message out of the government shutting down the internet, not wanting people to get the story out, to get their videos out, but people were persisting. They were using proxies. They were telling their stories. I was getting dozens and dozens of videos every hour of what was going on in different cities on the street. But the government, this time around, the crackdowns were much more violent than we've seen in many years, perhaps in all of the 40 years. And again, I think that's because the government of Iran has nothing to prove. They have no reason to show good behavior. They didn't show it under the nuclear deal. Why would they show it now when there is no deal in place? And it doesn't look like they're going to get a deal or any mercy from the US or the European allies. They're waiting, they're holding their breath. They were threatening the Europeans to try to get something out of them, but it looked like the facts were working against them. Those are the inconvenient truths, that the Iranians were cheating on the nuclear deal, and it made it a very bad case for the Europeans to try to ignore those facts and to go forward with a more economic focused deal between the two countries, or I should say the EU, the two bodies, the EU and the IRI, the Islamic Republic of Iran. So I think going forward, the protesters, if they're going to continue this, they're going to face a very bloody response. And I think that the Iranians know that that's the cost that they're going to have to pay in order to overturn this government or to see any solid changes going forward.
Sadly, 13 people were killed in southern Iraq during protests there. And in Afghanistan, a UN foreign worker and 8 Afghan soldiers were killed in separate attacks. Terrorism still alive and well in the world.
Exactly right. And I think there's no shortage of these types of stories, a shortage of crises. We're looking at these types of stories coming from every single continent. In the Middle East, you're looking at protests in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Iran that have not subsided. And again, the message is all the same. They want to throw off the influence of terrorism, and the terrorist groups want to influence the people, to get people, to intimidate them, to bring them on board, and use that terror money. And unfortunately, that terror money, that influence, is greater than that of the people. But the people are not backing down. They are more in number, but probably diminished in respect to influence and money. Again, you look around in South America, you have protests in a handful of countries. You look at the Middle East, everywhere. It's almost this rip and repair type of policies going forward, and the people are not backing down. They're making themselves known, and I wish there was more coverage. And I thank you, Hal, for bringing attention to so many of these international stories that are not told anywhere else. Especially here in the United States, we're very focused on what people want to prove as being worse than Watergate. But hopefully there will be more attention paid to these stories, because again, our foreign policy here in the West with these countries are being influenced every single day by these types of movements. And when you see, influences like Hezbollah in Lebanon, like the Iranian besiege in Iraq, like the Taliban in Afghanistan. This will affect our national security, and we should wake up to that fact.
Lisa, Tesla's Elon Musk has received 200,000 orders for his new Cybertruck, despite a botched debut where the windows were shattered. Did you see that?
I did. Thursday night. This is so exciting. I'm surrounded by a lot of Tesla drivers here in my family, among friends, and of course, Southern California, right? It's the right place for it. And everyone was very excited about this debut, and of course, it went a little bit awry. But nonetheless, if you take a look at this tank of a car, you can basically take a sledgehammer, from what I'm told, you can take a sledgehammer to it and it will not dent the very special metal that this car is constructed with. So this is the car of the future. I mean, when you have just the look of it, it looks like Transformers, those little robot toys that we played with when we were little in the 80s. But this is very interesting. It looks very, very futuristic. It obviously has all the bells and whistles that Teslas have and more. And it's not coming out for another 4 years, I believe, or 3 years, but already has so many people lined up to purchase the car. This is the future. Elon Musk is really the genius of our times with regards to this type of technology that he's freely giving every other car company. He thinks this is the way to get clean air, to put out nice futuristic type of cars in order to get people on board with clean energy. And again, in some parts of this country, it's working. I don't know how these types of cars are doing in Canada, but it's quite popular here, and I think it makes it easier. You don't have to go to the gas station, and you can have a very cool car with cool features.
Yeah, unfortunately here in Canada, because of the colder climates, the range is cut in about half because we have to have the heaters on all the time, Now, the thing about this Cybertruck 2, which is pretty cool, is 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds, 14,000 pounds towing capacity. But the only thing is, don't take the sledgehammers to the glass.
Oh, right.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from beautiful Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.